bro. We love to have you on. I want to bring in my guest. He is a chief of police, Oklahoma City. Ran for sheriff, of course, and all around good guy. He is Chief Virgil Green. And Chief, always a pleasure to have you on, sir.
Hey, LA, glad to be with you again, sir.
Yes, sir. So, you know, I wanted to have you on because of these latest shootings. And not just the shootings, but the letter of the law that's been taking place. And then the discrepancies as it relates to how law enforcement um, treats these offenders um, in these shootings. So my first question to you: we just saw one in Illinois and in a suburb, and I keep telling people it's not just a suburb, it's not the inner city, it's not churches, and not it's everything,
Yeah.
every place. These shootings, Chief, as you know, are taking place. So my first question is that um, a lot of what has come out of the Highland Park, Illinois shooting was about red flags. Explain what those red flags are and how they help law enforcement.
So, a good question, LA. And the red flag laws are put in place where if law enforcement has information to believe that a person is a danger to themselves or a danger to others and is suffering from some type of mental health issues, they can petition the court, and the court can grant officers to remove weapons from that person home. So there's several states that are using the red flag laws. I know Florida is one state. There are several other states, and Florida has had pretty good success with it. But there's a lot of states that do not utilize the red flag laws, LA. And so, and in this situation in Illinois, it would have definitely, uh, most likely, prevented what happened on the 4th of July.
So the red flags, do they have to do with weapons or age or both? Because I think there's some confusion with that.
So it doesn't have to do with age. It doesn't. It pertains to weapons. One of the things that has come out is that law enforcement went to this young man's home and they removed some uh, knives from the home. Uh, I don't believe that at the time that they suspected that this teenager had a type of weapon in the home. But the red flag laws are not just based upon your age, or but it's based upon the courts finding that you are a danger to others and a danger to yourself, and the fact that you do have weapons in your home. So that is one of the big signs, LA, is that you would have possession, or you would be in possession of any type of weapon, whether it be a shotgun or handgun or assault rifle. Then that gives the law enforcement the authority to remove those from the home.
But here's the thing, though, Chief. When you look at this situation, and this is where the critical part came in, that they noticed and they went back a second time to this offender, and he had knives. They removed the knives.
Yeah,
No guns, no guns. So then,
yeah,
how do you decipher? Okay, he had knives. You take away the knives, and you're not concerned about guns. That's the confusion that a lot of people are trying to get past. Okay, you took the knives, but if he graduated from knives to guns, then why not monitor him in that situation?
Yeah. Well, and you know, Ellen, this kind of goes back to what took place in Buffalo. You know, the similar age, you know, white male. There were some red flags. There were some signs that that this teenager had some issues going on, and law enforcement did not aggressively take the steps to um, make sure that this person was not a danger to others. You know, we can say danger to themselves, but you know, what has happened is that the fact that these individuals are a danger to others. And so you got the situation that happened in Buffalo and what just took place in Illinois are two examples where law enforcement should have took a much more proactive uh, steps to make sure that these individuals, if they did possess weapons, uh, bring that before the courts and let a judge decide uh, based upon the history of this young man. And I have to say, LA, both of them have utilized social media a lot. So they left a pretty good uh, digital footprint of things that they were doing on social media.
And we're talking with Chief Virgil Green here on the Batchelor News Radio Show. If you're just joining us, Chief, the thing is that that's been sort of the criticism is that um, they didn't go above and beyond. Like the man, first of all, he was a rapper. He had a following, right? And then you you have a situation where you're already going to the house, and then there's racial components, what I'll get into later. But you're going to the house, and you took knives. If you're taking knives, Chief Green, then why would you think? Why wouldn't law enforcement, in this case specifically, think that this young man is going to graduate? Because he's been graduating. He's been
Yeah.
graduating the whole time. So I don't understand why they didn't take him, as a risk and keep him, on the radar.
Well, and you know, LA, that's a really good question, and I think a lot more information has come out and will come out surrounding how law enforcement reacted. And I will say that the city, the suburb, I believe it's Highland Park.
Highland Park.
So they passed some information along to the Illinois State Police. So now there seems to be, you know, I don't know what their process is in Illinois, why the local police pass this along to the Illinois State Police, and I think that's another question that needs to be, you know, asked as to why that took place. But also now that the father is, there's questions surrounding if the father purchased or assisted with this young man purchasing these weapons, and the fact that this young man had already, law enforcement had already made contact with him because he had made death threats to his family. So there was a lot of things going on with this kid, and the fact that the local law enforcement was very aware of him, even to the point, LA, if you remember, a lot of people, officers, remembered this young man's tattoo on his face, and they said, "Oh yeah, that's the tattoo kid." So he was not a stranger to the local law enforcement there in Highland Park.
And here's the thing too, Chief. Um, I it it's one of those things where um, whether they were familiar with him or not in terms of law enforcement, if you have those knives in place, then there should be some kind of contingent plan or whatever between law enforcement and if it's mental or whatever. But it seemed to be some disconnect, and I guess my concern too is that you know it- how does law enforcement, how do you do your job on social media when there's thousands upon thousands of people are making threats and they disguise it right under um, freedom of police of the freedom of speech, and then this is what happens at that. I think that's part of the problem in distinguishing for law enforcement, chief, but also just distinguishing in general. Like, I mean, he
Y-
might say, "I hate cops," but that does that mean he gonna kill cops? I mean,
y-
that's part of the problem.
Yeah. Well, and you're absolutely right, LA. And one of the things that law enforcement across the country is struggling with is how social media, these platforms are not very open to assist law enforcement when it comes to how these things are monitored or what information that they can provide to the local law enforcement or even to state law enforcement. And so uh, that is something that really needs to change. You know, we talk about the First Amendment, you know, freedom of speech, but as you know, with social media, you know, a person can create a fake Facebook page or, you know, Twitter page, Instagram, whatever it is, they can create a fake page and you don't even really know who that person is. So uh, this is something that I know has come up previously on a federal uh, legislation as to, especially with Facebook, how they are going to really crack down on these type of people being on their platforms and using the platform as a way to put out information about what they're going to do. Because you kind of go back to the kid in Uvalde, Texas. You go back to the kid up in Buffalo. Everything was
Okay, we're losing Chief Humphrey. We'll try to.
uh,
There you go, Chief. Go ahead.
as as we talk about issues related to, you know, assault weapons, there needs to be some type of federal legislation that will regulate what social media can and cannot do, and how they're going to be able to allow law enforcement to have access to that information.
Well, here's the thing, too, Chief. And I know you know, you don't want to, you want to call out the bad guys, but you don't want to call out your colleagues. But
But
um,
sometimes you have to, LA. I mean, you got to call things out when they're not right.
yeah, and so I'm thinking if if you have situations where there are black men is getting shot, and then you have Dylan Roof who shot right in South Carolina and killed people, and they and law enforcement took him to get a burger at Burger King. When you have these discrepancies, is that inherently part of the problem in the sense that you know when we've seen even in Akron, Ohio, I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
They shot 70 times and killed this man. I don't okay. 70 times I don't get it. 3 or 4 times, maybe. 70 times they kill him. But with this man who gets on a roof, Chief, and shoots down in the parade, and he goes quietly and they take him quietly. Those are the issues that go into not just the fact that what you're trying to do, but the perception, Chief, of what you're trying to prove to black and brown people, that justice is certainly blind and justice has nothing to do with any color. You're just pushing forth what you need to do.
Well, LA, you know, And I'm gonna say this: the situation in Buffalo.
Right.
Um, this young man was taken alive. He was actively shooting when police officers arrived at the store. He was taken alive. So now you have a situation where a many unarmed black men have been shot and killed by police. The incident in Akron, Ohio, is another example of the excessive use of force. When you shoot somebody over 60 times with that many police officers shooting at one person, uh, he wasn't armed at the time. Uh, so quite naturally, LA, a lot of people are going to ask, especially people in our community, are going to ask the why question. Why is it that a black man cannot walk away with his life, but why can a young white teenager walk away with his life? Because a lot of people, LA, will never forget what took place at the church in South Carolina when they stopped and got this young kid a hamburger before they took him to jail. People won't forget that. And that is something that law enforcement has to own as to why they did that. What they, and people want to say, LA, you're making this out to be a racial issue.
Mm.
Well, you have to ask yourself and just be honest, is there a racial issue behind it? Because if that happened to a young black kid who shot and killed multiple people at a black church or a white church, would those same officers had stopped and got him a burger? And a lot of people are going to say no. So that's just the reality of the world that we live in, LA.
And Chief, I agree with you. I think that you're being real and with that and what you're saying, and we need that reality of what the real is. And you know, you you're black before you're a police officer and a chief officer, and we understand that. Let me ask you this: when um, you look at what's going on in these cities, and then you look at what's going on in January 6th, when some of your fellow officers, right, in DC, not only fought but actually died. A couple of people died, right, and
Yes.
you're fighting January 6th. How does that make you feel as it relates to what you're trying to do and the caution in your state in terms of what happens? Because these people went to Washington to kill the vice president, to kill the Speaker of the House, and kill a bunch of people. They went to kill. And Washington police, Capitol Police people, were injured and killed. So how do you feel about that as it relates to when you're there, or you're putting your troops out on the streets?
Well, Elliot, I say this. The first comment I'll make about that is that you have a lot of people who use the, the symbol of the blue flag, or hey, they support law enforcement. You had people on January the 6th who had those flags at the Capitol. So to me, all of those individuals who attended that did not support law enforcement. Now, if they want to sit there and say, yeah, I support them, but here you are, you're attacking law enforcement, the people who are there to protect those who are in Congress, whether you like those people or not, then you are attacking the same very people who have taken an oath to protect and serve. And so it was very disturbing to see even law enforcement involved with what took place in January the 6th. And so that's why I say, like, there is a serious problem within policing when you have individuals who were active law enforcement and retired law enforcement who attended January the 6th, who took part in assaulting police officers. And so that is something that uh, when people say, "Hey, we back the blue," well, you don't really back the blue uh, until it's something that you don't really support.
And I think too, Chief, that it's one of those things where um, people. It sounds good to talk about how we're supporting this and we're
Oh yeah, it sounds
supporting
real
that.
good.
Yeah, got a question if you could see it. Um,
Yeah, somebody asked,
yeah,
do I support the banning of assault weapons as many police departments are the country supporting the ban? Yeah, I mean, assault weapons is something that uh, should be left in the hands of military and law enforcement. Point blank. I mean, there are people who are responsible gun owners. Uh, they they may use assault weapons uh, as a hobby to go out and shoot. Uh, those are responsible gun owners. Those are people who are not looking to target people, or those are people who don't have some type of motive or mental health issues. So there needs to be some type of a of an assault weapon ban. And I'm gonna go back to what took place, I believe, under uh, I don't know if it was President uh, from Arkansas. Kind of help me, LA. What President Clinton? I think
yeah, he was
yeah.
he was doing
So Clinton put in under his administration,
yeah.
and thanks Jim for helping me out. He During his administration, they passed the assault weapons ban, and that assault weapons ban was for 10 years. And now the current president, Joe Biden, who was in the Senate, was very instrumental in getting that law passed. So this is the thing that I want everybody to think about. In that 10 years, think about how many mass shootings that we did not have, and think about how many mass shootings that occurred. I think, and after that assault weapons ban, you can look at the data, and it's going to show that these mass shootings, uh, especially with assault weapons, started to increase. And so there definitely needs to be some oversight, and it was good to see that Congress passed some legislation. But even with the passing that, LA and the listeners, you now you see politicians playing the politics, trying to maneuver some things around to where it's going to benefit them and supposedly their supporters.
Well, I just think too, Chief, that um, the push now is that one side is like, okay, we want to protest the shootings. The other side is that, hey, if we had more guns, then it would be fine. And at the end of the day, um, the discrepancy, Chief, if you can talk about, is that when a black man is stopped and he is um, whether he's doing anything wrong, but he doesn't retaliate. This story in Akron could have been a blown car, blown out the car or whatever. They said he shot whatever. Okay, and he's dead. He can't tell a story. But a white man, a white kid, can go on a roof, Chief, shoot people up, shoot them up, because he's having a bad day or whatever the case may be, it may be, and they protect his life rights. So one might have been doing something and is dead. The other one certainly took 7 lives. 7 lives. And he is alive for them to treat him as a guinea pig, Chief, and tell his story.
Well, and LA, and I think uh, that's the thing that so many people, especially in our community, are asking the question as to how time and time again uh, does a young white male walk away uh, and not be in the same situation as a black person who is unarmed. And as we are talking about this, LA, kind of go back to another incident that took place. I want to say, I believe in South Carolina as well, where the police officer was chasing a person from a traffic stop, and he shot him in the back as he was running. If it hadn't been for a citizen using his cell phone to capture that encounter, that police officer would have gotten out and would not have been charged with murder. And so then you look at time and time again, young white males who have committed these mass shootings. They're able to, as you state, you know, tell their side of the story. Now it's come out that, hey, this person had some mental health issues, all these things, that there were signs that could have prevented this. Uh, and even with the 15-year-old kid, LA, I think a lot of people have forgotten about this 15-year-old kid who, went to school with a weapon after his father had bought him a weapon for his 15th birthday. He goes to the school and kills several of his classmates. But there were signs there that could have prevented that from happening. That young man is alive. And so there's a lot of things, and people will have this. People will say, well, you guys are making this into, again, you're pulling race into it. But at the end of the day, LA, that's a question that needs to be asked. And that's a question that deserves a an intelligent answer, and not just one that says, well, I'm going to say this because I don't want to stir up any trouble. But again, you have to ask yourself why, even with the Buffalo shooting, this kid had a gun up to his head or his body, some body parts. They didn't shoot and kill him. And so you had people even asking the question, if that had been a black man in that store with a gun, would they have opened up? Would they have fired upon him? Uh, and so that's a legitimate question.
Well, and again, I go back to Chief, that you had mentioned the legitimacy, and the fact is that this again, I keep hearing about law enforcement at the core being broken. It's not. It was designed the way it is. It's just that the good chiefs that you are, and Chief Green, and the color that you are, just spackle into what's going on. But law enforcement was set up for law enforcement, enforce. And I just want to be clear too, because you and I are not talking about kids that are just acting up. I mean, I think kids learn behaviors from parents and older people and whatever the case may be. So I want to be clear about that. But let me ask you this final question to you, Chief Green. When you look at what's been going on in terms of these mass shootings and the dilemma that law enforcement has to go pick and choose, okay, well, maybe not. and they kind of think, what can law enforcement do? And if you're in charge, what can they do to do a better job of identifying these people, these situations, these mass shootings, and thwart those things?
Well, and I think it's a good question, La. And I think one of the things is that I think law enforcement is going to have to take every situation serious. And you know, I'm going to use another agency as a good example. Uh, how they when they receive this intelligence information and how they um, make sure that those things uh, are prevented from happening. New York Police Department has one of the most robust intelligence units, where if they receive some information, they're going to investigate it and they're going to make sure that that threat does not happen. And so I think we have a lot of law enforcement agencies that have the resources. Some do and some don't. But when you have an individual like the person in Illinois, which is a small suburb city, they did what they I obviously thought was best to do was pass that information on to the state police, but at the same time, uh, be aggressive in investigating these type of cases when they do, when you are aware of those cases, LA. And I think those you will find out a lot more information. Uh, and I know law enforcement officials are going to say that, hey, we are prevented from doing certain things because it's going to come up. We're violating this person's First Amendment right, or we're violating this person's Second Amendment right. But uh, when you when you continue to see these type of mass shootings happen, and it was here is a young man who got on the rooftop of a building, who planned this attack, had a way to leave after this attack. This is a wake up call for every police department of any size to say, when we hear about this information, either from the public or from the family, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that this doesn't happen in our community.
Right. And you got a question there or a comment there, if you could see it there.
Yeah, about the incident in Alabama, and I just looked that up, and I think this judge is refusing to release some video related to this K9 killing, uh, attacking a black person in Alabama, and so don't know a whole lot about it. But there again, you have to wonder why the judge is refusing to uh, allow law enforcement to release that body cam footage.
Yeah. Got another one there.
Yeah, and another person just brought up a question about Kyle Rittenhouse, you know, who was driven from Illinois to Wisconsin, and he actually, as you remember, walked by law enforcement with an assault weapon. Nothing ever happened to him, and we all know how that trial turned out, where he, was acquitted of any of the charges. So, there's a lot of things about uh, that situation in LA that's a whole nother podcast to talk about, because I think there was a lot of things that should have happened that didn't happen, and I think that's why this young man is wasn't convicted, and now he's reaping the benefits of even people like Whoopi Goldberg, who made certain comments, and he's winning these civil lawsuits.
Yeah. Well, I guess the final question is, what can people do? What you think people can do to um, thwart some of these mass shootings if they see the signs?
Well, and I think one of the things, we've always said, if you see something, say something.
Right.
Uh, that is really critical in every community, where people,
Welcome to Emerging
if they hear something, they
where we
need to
will
say
focus
something
on
and
unraveling the
report that to the local
difficulties
law
in the midst
enforcement.
of our journey and move toward forward progress. This program is not meant
Sorry
to
about that.
replace any form of
Hey,
therapy.
no problem.
You are
Yeah, we
encouraged
just
to